Hi, my name is Todd Leonard.
And my name is Herb Montgomery, and we're just talking.
We want you to vote. You got to vote. We need you to click that thumbs up. We're not telling you to click the thumbs down. We're not. I know that's an option, but you got to click the thumbs up icon. And please subscribe if you would like to uh, be in the know about our upcoming episodes, and click the bell icon, and you'll get a little bell reminder when our new episode drops. Thank you very much for showing your patriotism to Herb and I.
So, for the record, this is 2 days after the election, and Todd's still calling people to vote. Vote early, vote often, vote late.
Vote late, vote often.
If you're unfamiliar with this show, each week Todd, Leonard, and I take a moment to talk about the upcoming weekend's lectionary readings from the Gospels. We talk about that reading in the context of love and inclusion and social justice. Our hope is that our conversation, our talking, will be just talking, as in justice, but that also something that is said during this time would inspire you along with us to do more than just talking. So, Todd, what passage are we looking at this week?
We are in the Gospel of Mark again, which is great. We can stay there as long as the lectionary would like. And
I
it is
love
chapter
Mark.
12, verses 38 to 44.
Yeah, so this is where Jesus, gives his prophetic critique or condemnation even of the teachers of the law. And then we have the story of the widow's mites, which in my opinion is probably one of the most misunderstood, or at least again in my opinion, growing up, one of the most misinterpreted according to its context stories in the entire Gospel of Mark. I always heard this story, Todd, as look how sacrificial this woman was and what fidelity she had. And did you hear
I
that? Did
don't
you get that?
I don't understand how else you can interpret it. That is the only way you can interpret it, is that she gave everything to God. This is the temple
And we
collected
should
people's
too.
tithe and she gave it all. Therefore, she is the counterexample to people like the rich young ruler who had much wealth and refused to give it over to God. Uh, so she is the example. It's not about how much you give in measurement of money. It is how much proportionally, and where is your heart. This is clearly what the passage is teaching, and I don't know why, Herb, you would even come to any idea of wanting to play with what is a straightforward teaching of Scripture.
Todd, fasten your seatbelts because I look
Ah,
at it a little
jeez.
differently now. That what you just said was exactly how I grew up hearing it.
Of course.
So before we jump into that, context, I think, is what shoves me in the opposite direction of what you just so eloquently and accurately described as the traditional
Thank you.
interpretation of this passage.
Thank you.
Yeah. So he starts out with watch out for the teachers of the law. And again, it's too easy for post Reformation Protestant Christians to say, see, Jesus here was anti law. We're all about grace here. Watch out for those teachers of the
Mm,
law. And they start from a place of contrasting law versus grace. But here's the deal: Jesus wasn't a Protestant, he didn't live
nor is
post.
he a Catholic.
No, he wasn't a Christian. So
Right.
he didn't live post law versus grace debate. He didn't weigh in on that. What we had, the teachers of the law historically were a very real group that we don't need to take out of their historical context. So the Roman Empire was using the high priesthood that had been set up by the Persian Empire there in Jerusalem. It was the extension of Herod's kingship, who was a client ruler who worked for Rome. They were an extension and a way in which, and Herod's dead by the time this story takes place, but they were an extension of the Roman Empire's control over the region and the way through which Rome extracted tribute, tax, tithe, money from the poor people there. And so he's saying, um, uh, watch out, you teachers of the law. They walk around in flowing robes. They like to be greeted with respect in the marketplace. They have the most important seats in the synagogue. Remember, we're coming out of Mark 10, where James and John have just asked for the most important seats in the kingdom to sit at Jesus's left and right. So
Right.
he's contrasting
Right.
that and saying, or not contrast, but then he says, check this out. This is the phrase, and this is the one that's hard to argue with for me. Here's his problem. They devour widows' houses. Well, how do they do that? Well, because they're the teachers of the law. Historically, their purpose was to interpret the Torah in such a way that it gave religious justification, religious legitimization to the high priestly, the whole temple state structure and how it was exploiting the people. They gave religious legitimacy for that oppressive structure so that you thought you were expressing fidelity to God, but really it was just an economic system that extracted money from the masses. It made those who had even wealthier, those who had something, they had even more now, and those who didn't have anything, they had even less. The rich were getting richer at the expense of the poor as they were getting poorer. So they're devouring widows' houses through their religious teaching. This woman shows up, and Jesus isn't condemning her. He's condemning the system that makes her think she has to do this in order to be faithful to God, when really it's robbing her of the minimal means that she needs to just exist on. And yet and basically fidelity to God here was what it was called, but it was just that it was money for the Roman Empire, and being funneled through the temple state and into the pockets of the wealthy on the way. And so he's saying, you guys devour widows' houses, you're going to be punished most severely. And the very next sentence is Jesus sits down and watches the rich come throw their money into the temple treasury. They can afford it. But here's this widow. We were just saying they devour widows' houses. Now comes this poor widow who gives in her last 2 coins, the widow's mites. And he's saying they gave out of her wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything. She's put in all she had to live on. And he's not applauding her. He's
Right.
shaking his head at them that they have reached such a theology that she has internalized. And it's she thinks that faithfulness to God requires her to put herself in such dire straits.
He's what he's if you were to reinterpret or to retranslate, not retranslate because translation would say the way it's saying. If you were to paraphrase this passage, you would say, Jesus might say, they got out of the rich a little bit,
Right.
but they tapped this widow out. They
Yes.
drained her
Yes.
of everything.
Yeah, drained
They
her
got
dry. She had nothing
every
left.
freaking thing out of her and left her with nothing.
They have devoured this widow's house.
They have literally, like a beast, devoured her like prey.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
And it's condemnation. It's not praise of, look at this lady's faithfulness, we should all be
No.
like her. It's, look at what the system is doing to the poor. Woe to you, you are going to be punished most severely.
Mm.
I mean, that's a little bit different than what I grew up with, but I don't know how contextually, if you pull that story out of its context, then sure, you can have the traditional interpretation, but I don't understand how you can hold on to the traditional interpretation and leave the story in its context. Because
Right.
it's, you devour widows' houses, here's an example. Here's the statement, here's a real life proof.
but who, and this is one of these things where I would argue with any Christian church today that would elevate and say, look how much this woman gave,
Right.
and said, look, she got her Social Security check after she paid her heating bill, her electric bill, bought some food to get by for the month. She gets down, she has 2 cents left, or maybe today she has $2 left. And God bless her.
Or $20 even.
Yeah, I have $50. I mean, you go as high as you want. When somebody is living on a fixed income of
And this is the last bit they've got for this month.
$1,200 a month in today's economy, and they
Right.
got 40 bucks left. And God bless them, they come into church with what they got left and they put it in the offering plate. Jesus will bless you for that kind of sacrifice. And I would say, you, sir, are behaving like the teachers of the law.
Yeah, yes.
You should be
Are
preaching a
devouring
message of
widows'
saying,
houses.
widows, those of you living on fixed income, don't you dare put another penny in the offering plate. You need to be taking care of yourself. And if you got a few bucks left at the end of the month, hold on to it, or treat yourself out to dinner, or give your grandkids something. Please do not put your tiny little bit. We've got people who are making enough money who can put their money in the offering plate. You need to hold on to your money. We should not be devouring you so we can pay our staff and keep the air conditioning on.
So if we take this not just in its context in the chapter, but even in the larger context of Mark 7, Mark 10, Mark 12, if we zoom out even further, Jesus has asked the rich to sell everything they've had and give it to the poor, i.e., poor widow in this story, instead of applauding the woman and saying, you should be giving everything you have to this. It should be, you rich should be doing, channeling your resources in such a way that this woman doesn't have to do this. She's no longer poor.
Right. That's right. That's right.
So it's not even about her holding on. It is about her holding on to whatever she has left over and not feeling like, right?
But that's not going to change the system. He's going to the system.
Exactly. He's going to the system and saying, actually, those of you who are extravagantly wealthy here that have more than you could possibly ever need, we need to make sure this widow is not a poor widow.
Right. She shouldn't be
in this
to
situation
decide what
at all.
to do with 2 pennies at the end of the month. She should not be having to make that decision.
That's right. And shame on the community for her being in that position.
That's exactly right. Shame on the community. And
a little bit of economic justice in the passage rather than sacrificial giving.
A whole lot. I mean, and this flips the whole thing on its head. Put it in the context of everything else that Jesus is teaching throughout the Gospel of Mark. And this is, I mean, to go back to the traditional interpretation, the traditional interpretation of the teachers of the law and the traditional teaching of the widow and her giving, people have taken a Pauline reading of this. They have totally read justification by faith and works, and so he's condemning works-based religion and the teachers of the law, and he's honoring a woman of great faith who is giving her money. That's such a Pauline interpretation that is not in Mark at all. Mark is not a Pauline gospel.
Yeah, it's totally ignoring the Jewish cultural and historical context in which this story takes place.
That's right.
Yeah. So Mark chapter 7, just for those of you who may be just scratching your head still just a little, this is in perfect harmony with Mark chapter 7, where Jesus is speaking out once again and says, it says you have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. Moses said, honor your father and mother. Anyone who curses their father and mother is to be put to death. But you say that if anyone declares what might have been used to help their father or mother Corban, that is devoted to God, then you no longer let them do anything for their father and mother. You nullify the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down, and you do many things like that. So once again, this is money
Hmm.
being funneled away from those who need it most into the temple state and into the pockets of those who needed it the most. And I'll just sign off this one statement with A. Wright in his essay, "The Widow's Mite: Praise or Lament, a Matter of Context." It's actually quoted by Ched Myers in Binding the Strong Man, a political reading of Mark's Story of Jesus on page 321. But Wright writes, didn't mean to do that on purpose, the story does not provide a pious contrast to the conduct of the scribes in the preceding section, as in the customary view. Rather, it provides a further illustration of the ills of official devotion. Jesus' saying is not a penetrating insight on the measuring of gifts. It is a lament. Jesus condemns the value system that motivates her action, and he condemns the people who conditioned her to do it.
Hmm.
I'm thinking of how women interpret patriarchy at times, or internalize, sorry, not interpret, internalize patriarchy. I'm
Hmm.
thinking of how white supremacy can be internalized by non-white people in certain contexts. I'm thinking of, especially in Christian contexts, how LGBTQ people that are raised in a faith community can be conditioned to internalize homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, even in how they look at themselves. This is what's happening with this woman. She has been conditioned by those in positions of power around her. She's been influenced to
Hmm.
look at herself and her actions in a way that Jesus says is intrinsically harmful to her, and shame on you for making her believe that.
Hmm. And let's be clear, every Christian church, and some bear more responsibility than others, but it goes across the board. You have to ask yourself, if you're a leader of a Christian congregation, um, am I perpetuating a system of using the sacredness and holiness of the church as a means of bringing in money to pay for the operation of
The institution.
the institution of the church. This was one of my biggest moral dilemmas over the last 15 plus years of my ministry, is trying to justify the reason for collecting income into my church to pay for my church institution when it was not spending hardly any of its resources to fundamentally change economics of anybody's life. It is a major ethical dilemma that we all should have to grapple with. And I hate to lay it on you, but I think we must grapple with it. And if we can at
We have
least,
to allow ourselves to at least be confronted by it.
and at least, again, as Herb and I have said to each other at times, I think we've said it on this broadcast, Let's not let the perfect be the enemy of good, but let's say perhaps, maybe we start shifting the economy of our church budget a little bit more, a little bit more towards prioritizing redistribution, supporting the poor, and a little less of propping up the institution. Perhaps there's just a little bit more of us shifting it from institution based to community based,
Mhm.
and that we can move in that direction. That at least if we're moving in that direction, we're doing something worthwhile and something more in line with what Jesus is teaching here in the Gospel of Mark.
I like that. You don't have to go from 0 to 60.
No,
If you can only go from 0 to 10, that's okay for right now.
because we are overcoming 1800 years
Yes.
of church history. So we're
And
asking we're
depending
asking
on how
people to
large your
do
institution is.
a lot. It's asking you to do a lot. But if you can shift percentages a little bit to start undermining Constantinian
Hmm.
Christianity,
Hmm.
you're starting to move in the direction of Jesus centric economic principles.
Yeah, you're moving towards mutual aid and resource sharing, and that's a, and that can, I mean, I'm just looking down the pike at that. I know we're starting with a small transition, but as that continues to grow and develop and get larger and larger and more consistent, the early church had two critiques. One of them was that they took care of the poor better than the empire did.
Hmm.
And if you were to ask Christians today who they are more confident in taking care of them if they fall on hard times, their unemployment, the government, or their faith community in the church, those surveys have been taken. And without fail, people have way more confidence in their government to provide aid than they do their faith community. So again, it's just shifting a little bit by little bit, and if it continues to grow, continues to develop, it can be lifted up as a model, and maybe even bring about some systemic change in the larger community around you
Mm-hmm.
outside of the faith community. You don't know where that's going to lead.
Yeah. And this is really what we're talking about, is shifting from charitable work to
To
justice work. We're
justice.
talking about from
Yes.
reshaping economic uh, priorities rather than just bailing somebody out temporarily, but where you could actually see some changes. One of the great things that some churches are beginning to recognize is there are, in a lot of cities, historical congregations that have seen their membership declining. Their one asset that has been sucking in a lot of their money that they've been trying to raise money for in order to take care of the institution is taking care of their facility,
Yeah, the building.
the building itself. And what they start to wake up to is the idea, well, what if we were to give up part of this facility and turn it into affordable housing? And so they take what used to be Sunday school classrooms and fellowship halls and things like that, and they reallocate it to be turned into low income housing for folks. And so what you're doing right there is you are taking a major multi-million dollar asset and you're affecting the economy in a way that is in line with the gospel of Jesus by making homes available to people who can afford the market rate.
And that's not the only way you can repurpose that facility. There's tons of different
Mm,
creative ways you
true.
can repurpose your facility to be to be affecting systemic change in your community around you. That is an excellent one. But
Hmm.
for those who even that may be too high a bar for right now, there are other ways to do it too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Even
So,
if you just took the step of using your facility for community good in a way that leaves the facility used more than just once a week,
mhm,
even that's just a small step in the right direction.
true.
So there's a lot to think about in this week's passage,
Yep.
for sure. What
Anything else?
yeah. I think we need to be just conscious again of when our interpretations and our faith is doing societal harm, the way that these teachers of the law were teaching religious teachings, justifications, whatever you want to call it. Their teachings were bearing the fruit of harm to this widow. And again, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this over and over again for the next 4 years at least. And that's my warning. You may get tired of me saying this, but buckle in for the next 4 years. We need to be incredibly repentive, and repent is not a word.
Repentant.
Repentant. We need to be incredibly repentant, and we need to be um, making conscious choices towards change in regards to the way that our faith is harming our society around us today.
Mm.
I'm thinking of women's health care. I'm thinking of the fear that my trans friends are in right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the evangelical voting bloc is holds some responsibility for that. So yeah, this is another example. We have examples today where it may not be widows' mites, but we have examples today where faith is hurting people, and Jesus would condemn that just as much. Those are my thoughts this week, Todd.
Pay attention to those who are missing out, who are being harmed.
Yeah.
And if there's anything that Christ calls us to, it is to be sticking up for those people. And in this text tonight, it was sticking up for a widow who's being exploited. In our context today, those groups that Herb mentioned and others, we have to stick up for them. And
it doesn't matter
them.
how biblical you may think your actions are. Passages like this call us not to assess the biblicalness of our beliefs, but no matter how right we think we are, to ask, is someone being harmed by the way we're interpreting our beliefs?
Yes.
So, yeah. That's what I got this week. You got anything else this week, Todd?
I think that's a good, solid message for this week from this passage.
Well, tell us a little bit about your coaching. How's that going?
Can you believe it? Nobody's taken me up on it yet.
Okay.
We're just starting out.
Advertise it again. Tell us about it again.
It always starts slow. It's fine. It's all right. I'm here when people are ready. It's the gift that's here. It's just when you are ready for Christmas to happen, that's when it comes. And Christmas is when you want it to be. No, I'm silly.
What is your website again?
It's TJLCC, which stands for Todd J. Leonard, Coach and Consultant, TJLCC.com. And if you need somebody, I am a coach and consultant because I am not a licensed therapist. So you are getting somebody who has decades of experience through my pastoral ministry of working with people going through spiritual crises, existential questions about life, spiritual trauma, working with clergy who are trying to figure out where they are after working in ministry for a number of years, couples, LGBTQ folks, anybody like that. If I can be of service and help to you, that's what I'd like to offer, is some coaching and consultation to you. And you can connect with me.
And you are working on becoming a licensed therapist right now. You're in that process, aren't you?
That's correct. In 2 years, I'll be a licensed therapist, and will be then offering therapeutic counseling services in addition to this. So
the only therapy I'm in need of right now is the reaction that I just involuntarily have every time I hear dogs barking.
it's one of my special techniques is I have them bark every time we have a broadcast heard. So you slowly develop a tolerance to it. As I have my schnauzers
You're
interrupt the
coaching.
broadcast. That's
You're coaching
exactly
me out of it. I see. I see.
exactly the plan. So, but that's it. They've done enough for tonight. I'm not going to let them do more. It would be too much. I understand how much you can handle at a time. So I'm going to mute my mic, and I want you to tell us what's going on with Renewed Heart Ministries.
So we say it every week, but to those who are supporting Renewed Heart Ministries, just want to say a special thank you. The good news we have at the end of this year, we're closing in on the end of 2024. From now until December 31st, all donations to Renewed Heart Ministries to support our work of love, of justice, compassion, all donations to Renewed Heart Ministries are being matched dollar for dollar. So it can make your support go twice as far. And we're super excited for that opportunity. Super grateful for that opportunity to those that have made that possible. You check out Renewed Heart Ministries. Everything there is free. All the resources there. You could just spend countless hours looking through the Gospels and exploring the intersection of your faith and social justice engagement. So yeah, that's Renewed Heart Ministries. That's what's going on with us.
All right, and then I'm going to close with a joke because I found a great communist joke that I posted on my Facebook page a few days ago that Herb liked. And so I just got to say it again because not enough people found it on my Facebook page, and I was very disappointed that there weren't like dozens of people laughing at it. So I leave it with you. It's one of those yo mama genre jokes. Your mama's so classless, she's a Marxist utopia. It's a
Thanks,
great
Todd.
communist joke, and
I'm a big fan of communist jokes.
I know Herb loves them. Well,
They're
and
only
why?
funny if everybody gets them.
Thank you. So, that's great. Okay.
All
With
right.
that,
Thanks for
we'll
checking in with
sign
us
off
this
for
week.
tonight.
Hang in there. Keep doing good in the world. Don't let the events of this week rob you of your hope. Of course, grieve, lament, allow yourself to feel all the things you need to feel right now. But the work hasn't changed. It's gotten harder, but we're still called to the same work, and we're still going to be at it. So thanks for joining us here, and we'll keep doing it every week. We'll see you next week.